my last Mega Man review, I took a look at Mega Man X2. I wanted to see if it built off of the original Mega Man X the same way that Mega Man 2 in the classic Mega Man series built off the original Mega Man. This time we're going to take a look at Mega Man X3. Mega Man X3 retains the core mechanics of the Mega Man franchise. You still steal Robot Master, or in this case Maverick, weapons, and you use them all over the place, and it's always been kind of a solid mechanic. But it also makes a couple changes, and I wanted to see if those were the right changes. This is actually not connected to anything. I'm not actually playing a game. Mega Man X3 starts with an incredibly long and drawn-out cutscene. Instead of the fast-paced and high-energy introduction we saw in Mega Man X2, we got a very boring mass of text accompanied by some pretty bland imagery. The music is repetitive and not at all catchy. The whole thing is just a chore to get through. Dr. Doppler, a Reploid scientist, has created a method to neutralize all Mavericks, the evil Reploids that Mega Man X has fought up until this point. A great many powerful Reploids have decided to form a utopian town with Dr. Doppler, and peace seems to be assured. A few months later, the neutralized Mavericks reappear and start a rebellion. Mega Man X and his partner Zero are called upon to save the day. While I actually really enjoy the lore in the Mega Man and Mega Man X universes, I don't really care if they're presented in-game very well, especially after the second or third time playing it. For me, the Robot Master's level design, music, and weapons trump story in any Mega Man game. X3 does have kind of an interesting story, but the dialogue scenes tend to last a bit too long. No matter though, because you can easily skip through them quickly. This leads me to my first real beef with this game, and that's the music. Sure, there are a couple good tracks. Gravity Beetle is actually pretty good. Toxic Seahorse is okay too, and I get it stuck in my head quite a bit. But most of the tracks just have a bad, synthesized, distorted guitar sound, and it's just this chugging, and there's no real melody to a lot of it. It just doesn't appeal to me. A lot of the tracks are also on short, repetitive loops, and I just don't enjoy it. The previous games had much better overall arrangements, including more instruments and longer refrains. The variation between tracks was also a lot greater in the previous Mega Man X games. The percussion, which I tend to pay a lot of attention to, just doesn't stand out nearly as much in this game. And that makes me sad. The result is a pretty unmemorable soundtrack by comparison to all the other Mega Man games that come before X3. Now, the gameplay in Mega Man X3 is obviously going to be pretty damn close to the last two games. Moving, jumping, and shooting is nearly identical, save for the new additions included with X's armor upgrades. To start, X has all his staple abilities, including his normal charge shot and now iconic dash ability. One major change in X3, however, is the ability to play as X's Maverick hunting partner, Zero. Zero controls very similarly to X, though he does feel a bit bulkier and slower, but that may just be me. He also has a double charge shot right off the bat, and has a finishing Z-Saber move that does tons of damage. You are forced to play as Zero in the intro stage for a short period of time, but after the main game starts, you can call upon him to help out in most stages. But X will always come back to take over the mission when you get to a mini-boss or the main Maverick. Zero's real benefits are a bigger life gauge and his attack powers, but he quickly becomes outclassed by X in maneuverability as soon as you find the boot upgrade. Zero can't air dash, but X can, and can even use the dash to perform kind of a double jump to get to those out-of-reach places. If you let Zero die, he's out for the rest of the game, and it prevents you from collecting a pretty awesome ability later on. So that, paired with his inability to air dash or use boss weapons, keeps me using X for the most part. The level design and enemy placement in X3 has changed from the previous two games. Stages seem quite a bit longer, and you have more opportunities to run into mini-bosses and look for secrets. Enemies crowd the paths a lot more too, making blasting through enemies considerably tougher. You'll take a lot more damage than you did in previous games. Enemies are designed to be quite a bit harder to kill as well, making levels perilous. You have to tread a lot more carefully in Mega Man X3. The Maverick bosses all have pretty cool designs. I really like Crush Crayfish in particular, with his giant claws. The boss battles are all pretty tough without weakness weapons, and they can get almost too easy and boring once you do have the weaknesses. That can sometimes be a series issue rather than an X3 issue, so it's not that big of a deal. Every stage has at least 3 collectibles: a heart tank, an armor upgrade or an armor chip, and a sub-tank or a new ride armor. In addition to new capabilities to X's dash system on his boots that I mentioned earlier, he also gains a new type of charge shot, which we'll get to in a bit, and a helmet unit that shows a map with the locations of hidden items when you start a stage. Armor chip capsules show up as well, which will upgrade the abilities of any one of X's armor parts. Unfortunately, you can only collect one of these at a time. The leg chip allows X to do a second air dash. The arm chip gives you a meter that will allow you to shoot charge shots until the meter runs out. The head chip will slowly refill X's energy as long as he stands still, and the body chip further reduces damage. The last 2 X games had a few stages that would allow you to jump into a big ride armor and wreak some havoc. X3 ups the ante, however, and allows you to collect 4 different types of ride armor. And the best part about that is that you can take those ride armors and you can summon them at special platforms in most of the stages. Each ride armor has its own ability, from basic punching to hovering and firing missiles, to a spiky extendable fist, to a water-based torpedo launcher. The armors are pretty cool and can be useful in some situations. It's a pretty neat addition to the series that I wish they would have allowed to carry over in future games. X's new X-Buster upgrade is probably my biggest problem with Mega Man X3. You'll get a double charge shot like in Mega Man X2, but this time, if you fire them both off at the same time, they'll combine into one screen-sized combo of blasts. While this sounds cool in theory, it's actually quite cumbersome and leaves X open to attack. The first problem is that the first charge attack is slower than normal shots, so that your second shot can catch up and combine. So if you're used to how fast the charge shots traveled before, you need to adjust your fire, especially if you're doing so from a distance. Second is that the charge shots kinda pause when they combine. The effect is cool looking, but if you're trying to get a shot off on an enemy quickly before he raises his defense, there's a good chance the whole attack gets blocked. Additionally, after the second shot is fired, there is a period of complete vulnerability where X can't fire anything. This really sucks and makes it a pain in the ass to even attempt it. After my 3rd playthrough for this review, I started using alternate methods of attack to keep myself from pulling my beard out, having to use the combined shot. This actually made the game a lot more enjoyable, especially because that meant I was using Maverick weapons in creative and fun ways. In Mega Man X2, there were several optional bosses to take on, so you could skip a boss battle with Zero near the end of the game, and receive a slightly different ending. In Mega Man X3, similar boss battles exist, but 2 of them are forced. You will face the minions Bit and Bite at some point. Depending on what weapon you use to defeat them, you can destroy them once and for all in this first encounter, giving you the ability to avoid a battle with them in the final stages. Additionally, one more optional boss is found by discovering a hidden teleportation hatch in a number of Maverick stages. The teleportation hatch takes you to a secret level where you will face off against Vile. Defeating Vile with the right weapon ensures he doesn't reappear later on in the game and allows you to collect a super weapon from Zero. After the Maverick stages, the mini-boss and optional boss fights, and collecting all the upgrades for X, you're off to Dr. Doppler's base. These stages are pretty standard final stage fare for X games, which isn't to say that they're bad. The cool thing is, depending on your actions in the Maverick stages, the final stages change a bit. If you defeat Vile once and for all, the second stage is quite a bit tougher. If he's not defeated, it appears as though he's already been through this stage and has done quite a bit of damage. If Bit and Bite aren't defeated, you'll face them in the first stage, but if they have been killed, you'll fight this weird trash robot. If you decide not to take any of the armor chip enhancements, you can find this hidden area where Dr. Light will give you a chip that gives you all the cool abilities of all the chips at once and turns you gold. It's definitely worth it to hold off on the chip upgrades to snag this later on. Keep Zero alive through the main game, then let him take on this mini-boss in the second Doppler stage, and the boss will make a final attack crippling 0, and he'll give you his Z-Saber as a result. This is the equivalent to the Hadouken or the Dragon Punch from the previous 2 games, except you don't have to be at full health. The Z-Saber deals a ton of damage off all the bosses in the game. It doesn't one-hit kill anything, but it's still super useful. I didn't play Mega Man X3 nearly as much as the previous 2 games growing up. I didn't really get a chance to. It was super hard to find. When I did get to put a bunch of time into it, it was after emulation was finally able to handle it. Early SNES emulators were famously unable to emulate the chips found in games like Mega Man X3. I didn't enjoy X3 nearly as much, so I just didn't play it often. I last played the game for my 24-hour stream last year, and I had a lot of problems getting through, likely due to my lack of sleep, and I had even said I never wanted to play it again. So does Mega Man X3 stack up to the first 2 Mega Man X games? Absolutely. It makes some really neat changes while retaining the spirit of the Mega Man series. It's a good game. I actually set out to make a video showing why X3 is inferior to X1 and X2. And after playing through it once, I decided to play it again just to get some more footage. And then I was curious and I watched a speedrun, and then I played through it a 3rd time and had even more fun. Mega Man X3 isn't perfect by any means, and there are plenty of things that frustrate me. It's tougher than previous games, it has a weird charge shot mechanic, the music blows, but overall it does a lot of really cool things. It gives you more opportunity to explore and find secrets, it has some really cool new special abilities. Your actions in the first part of the game affects what happens in the final boss stages, and the Z-Saber is really neat. So that's all I have for Mega Man X3. I appreciate you guys watching, and later.